So we've got a wonderful panel. All right, so they'll introduce themselves shortly. Right, and what we're going to try and do, all right, is talk about a couple of different things, but they really go along this area. So, short agenda. Everybody's going to introduce themselves. We're going to talk a little bit about our subject matter, which included private equity as well as M&A. So we'll see how all that goes. Private equity came off of our agenda for now. We're going to do a bunch of round robins as it relates to some questions. And I'm going to give you a little bit of input that I got from the folks at Bain after reading a bunch of pamphlets and booklets that they put out. And I'm not sure they're really all that helpful to us. So let's see if we've got everybody. So not everybody stood up and stretched. I need everybody to stand up and stretch. Come on.
We're good. We're good.
Come on. All right.
Grace, I'm all over your face. I love it.
Couple of different things as it relates to the folks at Bain. I read stuff from this year, I read stuff from last year, and I read stuff from the year before. And they said the same thing. Interest rates are going up, large investments in tech, and deals seem to be reducing in terms of quantity. Well, they keep saying the same thing over and over again. We have a panel that's better than that, and they're going to tell you some really good things. So why don't we start with Marco? Why don't you do a quick intro? Say hello to everybody.
Everybody, hi. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you perfectly.
Perfectly. Thank you. Chris, I'm right behind you. I was just going like this.
On the other screen, yes.
I see myself right behind you. That's all right. It's all good. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. Everyone it's there that I would love to see. At some point we'll make the time to do it. Carol, you look great. See you too. The Soriano family group started in 1903. We were part of the first automotive family members. I would say automotive and two-wheel sectors. We rebirthed that brand in 2020. Where we are doing two aspects of engineering. One is mechanics and electronics, allowing us to go into projections or of prototype phases for both industries. So right now we're working with various brands in Italy. We're expanding our very own brand in the United States through McLaren USA. And on the other hand, we're dealing in telecommunications as well, where we are an MVNO, which is contracted directly with Win3, which is one of the largest telecom companies in Europe. We have a real estate arm that is dealt mostly with my siblings. I am, by default, the youngest sibling of 5 and the chairman of the family office group. So that presents its own challenges, as you may understand, but it's always fun to tell my older brothers what.
Thank you. Well, I'm assuming you do a really good job at it. Thank you very much, Marco. Let's see. Why don't we do Tom? Tom's on the screen.
Yeah, good afternoon. Tom Zucker, president, founder of EdgePoint. I have the unique journey of leading a national M&A advisory practice based out of Cleveland, Ohio. We do deals all across the country. The benefit that I had that I started in a family business, a 50-year-old family business. I was on the backside of that, and I got to see how transition did not go well, and it became my why. I've helped do M&A advisory for the past 25 years. So I look forward to sharing my thoughts with you guys.
Thank you very much, Tom. Let's see. Let's do Carol. There you go.
There we go. Hi, my name is Carol Pepper. I'm the CEO and founder of Pepper International. And for the last 24 years, I have set up family offices all over the globe. I built family offices on 5 continents and acted as an external CIO to certain single family offices. I speak on Bloomberg television about once a month talking about the markets, and my family's do all kinds of things, including M&A and private equity deals. So I think this will be a very interesting discussion because family-owned businesses have their own dimensions, personal dimensions that get added into the business discussions as well as the economic discussions. So we'll talk about that a bit today.
Thank you very much, Carol. And Chris?
Chris Anci. I've worked both on the buy side and the sell side for the last 30 years. ran a broker dealer here in the city for about 15 years. And then for the last 8.5 years was COO of a family office, which recently wound down. But I've been active in both the M&A side and the private equity side. So look forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much. And just 30 seconds about me. Spent the first half of my life with a couple of Fortune 50 companies. I basically did 5 things: built, bought, fixed, sold, or wound it down enterprises. Currently, what I work on is something we call make-ready services, basically getting businesses ready for liquidity events, debt investment, and sale. And on the side, when I have nothing else to do, I chair a not-for-profit here in New York, referred to as a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, basically dealing with providing capital as well as training and guidance for the owners. And we concentrate on 4 sectors: women, minorities, immigrants, and veterans. So if anybody that is aware of anybody in that space and they're looking for somewhere to go, I mean, it doesn't meet all the criteria for this august group, you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. So we need a kickoff with some general thoughts. I thought, Marco, maybe you could do that for us. Give us some thoughts as it relates to what you see in the M&A sector and where things are headed.
Sure, thank you. A couple of perspectives, I suppose, how European family offices are behaving as opposed to what I've seen with American family offices.
Can you talk louder for us, Marco?
Sure. Is
Thank
this
you.
better? Yeah. So a couple of perspectives, how European family offices are currently seeing things versus what the US is doing. And this is relevant to policies that the government is talking about, especially with tariffs. As you understand, this is changing a lot of the landscape of how Europeans were looking at the US in terms of investments. It's a constant battle when it comes to discussing these matters with the chambers of commerces that are typically based in capital cities in the US that can inform family offices in Europe what to best do when it comes down to taxation purposes or any type of new tariffs that are being discussed. And to this matter in M&A, that plays a big role because we do either roll-ups or M&A transactions relevant to expanding our businesses, right? So from the manufacturing perspective, in the automotive sector, when you're looking at suppliers that are participants of, I'll give you an example, the Pirelli family, which is a well-known Italian family for tires, are currently being owned more than 50% by Chinese family offices. So that was already a problem with the US market. When you're expanding into the US, it's basically being said, we cannot use those tires. And these are relationships that you have built over 100 years. So how do you manage that? You got to look for new suppliers in the US that are approved for your BOM and then move forward. In the telecommunications arena, it's the same play because the Chinese companies that are participants of this sector are mostly Chinese as well and Koreans. So you have to look for better ways to partner up in collaboration with these families, especially if we're looking to do expanding our services as primary operators with telecoms. And that's been also a bit of a challenge. But nonetheless, the M&A sector, I think, is growing. Private equity sector is also growing. What we're discussing, cross-border transactions, is also it's a possibility. It hasn't stopped. As a matter of fact, I see growth in this. Real estate, countries in the Mediterranean countries, they are both attracting Northern European family offices as well as Americans that are looking to move to live there. You know, we're looking at countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece,
Yep.
France, and you probably, some of you guys sitting here already have homes there, or you're looking to go there at some point in your life because it's great, the lifestyle.
Thank you. Thank you. So I appreciate that. Tom, why don't you give us some feedback from South Florida?
Yeah, much appreciated. I'll let you know the M&A marketplace is resembling that of early 21, not from a volume of deal flow, but the quality of deal flow. We are a non-private equity centric investment bank. We sell privately held businesses across the country. And in the last 6 months, I cannot understand or comprehend why the flight to quality has come back to the M&A deal marketplace. We have more deals in our pipeline, and the quality of the deals that we're looking at are far superior than they might have been 12 months prior. And so that's a good sign for the M&A market rolling into 25. We do expect the private equity market to unthaw, to accept the realities of the capital markets, and to begin to realize some of the investments that they've held on far too long for. We would expect that happens probably in the third and fourth quarter in earnest and rolls well into 26. So unless something significantly changes from a black swan event, we're expecting a pretty rosy outlook for the remainder of 25 and 26.
Thank you very much, Tom. Chris, just some thoughts as you see the marketplace today?
I'm in agreement with our two fellow panelists. I think that now that the election is out of the way and then we're ushering in some deregulation, I think that that's going to take some kind of a boot off of a little bit of the throat that's been affecting the economy to date. In my conversations, I've been told or shopped numerous HVAC roll-ups. I've been shopped orthopedic roll-ups, laser eye care, acquisitions. So there, to Tom's point, there's definitely some activity in what I would loosely refer to as the real economy, real businesses that are being sold, families that may have had these businesses for quite some time are trying to get out of them, or guys that have been running them for 30, 40 years are finally trying to also, wind that down. And in regards to the private equity market, I think the longstanding question that we all had is everybody going to finally mark that portfolio to reality and begin to move some of that paper via either an IPO market that may or may not resurrect itself, or in some form or another. But I do think that we're finally going to start clearing the decks on both cases.
Sounds good. Carol, what's your perspective?
Well, I think we heard earlier today from Alan Patrikoff about the silver trend, and I think it's very much affecting the M&A market because, some people are just at that point. It's time to sell the business. If the kids don't want it, there's actually a demographic imperative happening as well. And I think that's why you see a lot of these combinations and roll-ups happening. And frankly, some of the headcount will be taken out by artificial intelligence bots in the future, because a lot of the customer service or things that people needed when they had 20 of these different smaller operations around the country can now be combined, and technology can make them a lot more efficient. I think there's a much more strong focus on cash flow, going back to that reality. And I agree with Suzanne, if the interest rates are not coming down anytime soon. So what does that mean? If you want to buy a company or you're looking for a good M&A candidate or a new sector to get into, a lot of these traditional businesses that are cash flowing, and if you can roll up a bunch of small ones, you can create something very interesting. So that's domestically. I agree with Marco. The harder question right now is what's going to happen for cross-border, particularly even within NAFTA. So we saw tariffs put off, suddenly they're off again. So it's very hard for CEOs to make long-term business decisions right now because things are so unstable. But having said that, I know a lot of folks, for example, who over the last couple of years relocated due to the China issue, relocated a lot of their operations to Mexico, for example, so that they could be our closer, lower cost labor center partner. And now they're not quite sure what's going to happen with that. So let's hope that common sense prevails and we're able to kind of keep that NAFTA block together. I think we will be able to. I think common sense will eventually prevail.
They just pushed back the tariffs another month.
Yes, only 1 month. It's still hard if you're a CEO to make a decision.
That's a little bit of tough on long-term planning. By the way, you didn't get to see it, but we got a great picture from Marco. Basically, he's going like this, shooting everything. And
I know.
It's making life great.
It's kind of crazy if you run a big business and you have to make longer-term decisions and not change your mind every day.
Thanks,
But then you read in the paper today that there's some auto parts that actually go back and forth a couple of different times. There's like an axle gets made, gets shipped here, puts onto something else, and it goes back. So it ends up getting tariffed like 2 times or potentially 3 times. So the domestic tariff thing is kind of definitely a wrinkle, but maybe the brinkmanship will make sense at some point. Who knows?
I sort of laugh. I've traveled to close to 100 countries during the course of my business career. And I think some of the strangest international stuff is cross-border stuff that's going on right now. So a little bit nuts. Tom, I want to start with you. You said deal quality seems to be on the good side, and I love hearing things like that. What do you consider some of those characteristics, can't even talk English, characteristics of quality deals? What are some of the 3-4 things that you think make a transaction look good? Is it cash flow? Is it quality of earnings? Give me some factors that you think are really important.
Yeah, good question, Greg. You know, obviously the eye of the beholder is what determines the quality of the deal. From our perspective, it's the certainty of closure and it's the premium of price. And to get the premium of price, you have to start doing a few things. Number one, you have to have recurring revenue, certainty of revenue, whether that's reoccurring or reoccurring. If it's software as a service or anything that has a repetitive nature to it, lenders like that, allows for more leverage on a transaction, allows for a higher price. In the last several years, there's been a high interest rate environment, which have led people away from the industrial sector. The last 6 months has been a strong rebound in the industrial side, particularly engineered seals, gaskets, fittings, valves, couplings, anything with flow metering still continues to be a very hot segment. We're expecting that the onshoring and reshoring initiative associated with most of the American agenda today will create more opportunity for manufacturers and there'll be even more demand. So regardless of where the interest rate environment, we are strong and bullish on the industrial sector, even those people that are providing industrial services in and around a facility. That continues to be what we think is going to be a strong momentum going into 2025 and 6.
Thank you. I know the work that, or the investigative work or diligence I did is related to Soriano Global Holdings. You guys seem to be deep in the industrial sector, if I got it right. What's your take on all that, Marco?
Well, digitization of inventory management systems has become extremely important for us. And there are multiple companies out there that are competing with each other. And this is, taking your stock out of stock, in stock, and how you manage this inventory through borders. So we're dealing in Spain, Italy, and the US, which is extremely difficult as it is right now, as you may imagine, but it's a way of us of balancing these things out. Now, the best way to deal with these companies is that they give you their software, as it was mentioned, on a SaaS service, for example, and you amortize it over 5 years, but always make sure that the license is yours. You do not want to be paying fees to software as a service forever in your companies, because that's not sustainable at all. So my negotiations typically with any type of tech company that is optimizing my businesses all across manufacturing, designing CAD systems, designs, whatever it may be, is that we own the license for good after we amortize it over 5 years at least. The ESG framework, just quick.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of a lot of family offices right now. And banks that are managing these family offices' money, they must find deals, alternative investment deals in this space. So if you're looking to start a project, always go that route through the banks, because the banks are the ones really making the decisions, whether you're looking for equity or lending, if that's the case. That's it.
Understood. Thank you. Karen, thoughts on what makes for a good deal?
Well, I think, what has always made for a good deal. Nothing is new under the sun in that respect. We want to have a good value. We want to have a quality management team. We want to have let's go back to Michael Porter, those of us who went to business school back in the day. What is your competitive advantage? Why do you exist? And how do you exist in your particular niche? And what is your reason to be alive as a company? Why should somebody invest in you versus the others? It's been a market the last 10 years where the big get bigger, the leaders stay leading. But there can be cases where a new technology, as I said, AI again, unfortunately, in some ways can cut so much of the cost out of a business that it can change the dynamics relatively quickly. But I'm not so sure how far down, I'm interested what maybe Tom thinks on this, how far down the value chain is that adaptation going beyond the really large corporations today? So, but I do think people still matter, human beings still matter. Having actually caring about your employees and having a good team is still important. And having clean financials, obviously people want that. And does the founder want to stay involved, or does the founder want to go? I know a lot of founders, for example, who took, let's say, 80% in cash, and they wanted to keep 20% with the new private equity owner. And almost every single time, the private equity owner ruined the business, and the founders were crying and wishing they had taken all cash. So my advice is, if you're selling a business to a private equity firm, just sell it. You know, kiss it on the forehead and let it go, because whatever they're going to do to it, you're not going to like it. And chances are good, a lot of your clients are not going to like it either, and they may have to morph it into something else, or they will kill it in 18 months, which is what they do with 3/4 of the businesses that they buy. So that's
So-
my take on that.
So good
And-
take.
And I know this particular orthopedist, when we were at dinner one night and his other buddy said, I can't believe you sold out to private equity. He goes, oh, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll have it back in 3 years.
Exactly. I see a lot of heads nodding in the audience on
Well,
this point.
But there's another piece to that too, and I've dealt with this with a number of clients that we've had over the course of years. And the private equity guys don't want to pay out for the full 100%. And as long as they have majority, depends 50, 60, 70, 80, all right? They like making sure that the former owner is holding something. And the former owners always have regret. I'm dealing with one of those right now on a former client. And his basic answer is, I'm leaving. I've had enough of them.
Yeah.
So
They're
it's
miserable.
unfortunate.
Basically, they're all miserable.
Anyway,
Live in a different world, guys.
Miserable.
so question for you, Chris. All right, we'll start with you and then we'll see how the rest of the panel might want to join in. How long should a business owner or owners, okay, be thinking in advance before they put the for sale sign up? And what are some of the things they should do?
I think that's kind of a broad stroke question. I think that there may be some businesses that they don't sell. And I think that it also depends, on the stage. If you got a first gen guy and he's created some AI company, out of thin air that's been able to digitize, as we just read, Goldman Sachs had an AI write their S1 in 3 minutes, where the lawyer took 6 months. So if you've been able to create something like that and then there's a bid for it, I think that's a pretty sweeping thing. But if you're a Midwestern family that's making screws that don't strip after 3 turns, that you get when you get offshore screws, you may want to try to convince your kids that maybe they should hold on to that unless there's a big enough bid for it. So I think that's a pretty broad question, but in a vacuum, I think that if you've got a first gen, if you got the third gen who's sitting there, 80-year-old company, maybe they own the dirt on their plans and they got other things that factor, then I think they probably should work with a 2 or 3 year plan. But I think I think you actually are better off to answer because you advise these guys. But I think probably 2 or 3 years ahead of time, they need to start getting the ducks in a row for tax planning, trusting stuff up and making sure. And if there's real estate involved, get the 1031 ready to go. You may want to own your triple net lease Dunkin' Donuts things afterwards and stuff like that. So
Yeah, so in the services that we offer, just to give some insights, our general recommendation is a minimum of 2 years. All right, and most of the owners going, that's way too long. And going, no, that's probably not long enough. Now,
agree.
Marco, are you still out here? You moved on the screen for me, but I saw you hold both of your hands up with all your fingers out. So talk to us a little bit.
10 years. 10 years. You need to start looking ahead 10 years. Now, when we provide valuation reports or we're doing any type of financial modeling for any of our businesses, I always look at 10 years. Why? Any type of new product, service, or brand positioning will take you at least 5 years of investment, from prototyping to hybrid to a final definitive product to put in the market. And that's a 5-year investment before you can realize that you finally have clients that are loyal to your business. At that moment, when you have those contracts with distributors, concessionaires, dealerships, or whatnot, you can then start thinking, all right, maybe in 2-3 years, somebody bigger is gonna want me to sell. And that's a possibility. That's happened to us throughout the 120 years every time. Today, technologies, before a year's end, there's something new. So if you have technology underwrapped in your company and you think that that's the value of your company, think twice, because it's possible that if your company is not doing well, they're going to chop you up and that technology is going to be worth nothing. So whether you have all the patents or not. So I'm always very careful with that. It's really the core business. And that comes down to what was said by Carol, people, the management. There is an investment and there is the management behind the wheel. You need to have the best people you can possibly have that are going to work blindly to make this company go forward. And that requires motivation, emotions, family involvement, everything you may imagine. And so it's not that easy to answer, but it's how we're doing it.
You give good advice. Your older siblings ought to be listening to you right now. Tom, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, we're having hundreds of dialogues with family business owners each year, and the dialogues center around a basic premise. Are you greedy or fearful? And at any point in time, we can certainly talk ourselves into fearful. As age gets higher, people become to be more conservative and the fear gets to be a little bit larger. And they worry that what they have will be lost and what is today will change. We talk about windows. We talk about when windows of the market open up, and we talk about the window of your business being ready. And so all of those things go into the fact of when you should start the journey. And Marco's dead on. I mean, it's a 10-year vision of what you want the outcome to look like. And it starts with succession. It starts with priming up your management team, and then talks about prepping the business, whether that's margins, indirect cost spend, things of that nature, pre-sale, so the business can maximize value. You know, we're big advocates for pre-sale M&A. Before you sell, let's do some M&A, prove your capability, increase the EBITDA size, buy a couple at 4 when you sell at 8, you know, things of that nature. But it's typically a 2 to 3 year time that we're beginning the journey with our owners in advance.
Thank you. Carol?
I would add to that. I would absolutely agree with Marco, 10 years. And what I see with a lot of families is, you know, do the children really want to take over the business or not? And having that conversation, even in college, finding out, do you have kids who want to be in this family business? And if the answer is no, nobody's better equipped than you are to sell the business so the kids could have other options. And you have to look at that, not wishing that your son or daughter would want to take it over, but actually getting them to embrace it. Because if they don't embrace it and you just keep waiting, and then you're 65 and your kid is 40 and still dragging his or her feet, you're much more in trouble. Whereas you might have had a better window, as Tom mentions, to sell it earlier. I also see a lot with international families where everybody has sent the kids to the US. So the kids all live here. Maybe the businesses are still in home country, and those kids have never lived in home country. They have no interest really in going back and trying to run a legacy business at home. So again, you're the best person to sell it if you're the person who built it. So actually embracing the reality of the family situation as early as possible is the key to really making that decision.
I'm going to interject here, unasked, and maybe the only person in the audience here that really would care to hear what I'm about to say is maybe Marco himself. Certainly you, Carol. But you can't engage soon enough.
By the way.
You can't engage soon enough with your family. And that is what all the bankers, all the PE guys in the world, all the acquisitive family offices who want to make a quick buck on someone else's business must remember. You really need to have the family, as Carol was saying, lined up, interested. And I have a view, that given your family a nicely operating with a lot of conditions attached to that, to your descendants is a far better thing than a big wad of cash. But that's not what this topic is about.
I'm sorry, Pierre. Can you restate that? Keeping the company?
Giving a viable operating business to your kids is a far better thing
agree.
for the 50-year perspective or 100-year perspective than a big wad of cash.
Right.
Yeah,
I'll give a couple of examples because
as long as they're willing and capable of running it.
right. We have Pat Soldano runs the Institute for Family Businesses, which is in DC, and she's actually an evangelist for this whole movement of keeping the businesses. Some of these businesses acquire so much real estate over time that the real estate assets become these massive holdings outside of the business itself. So we had a family office in Brooklyn who had acquired, they were importers of 5 and dime stuff from Japan back in the 60s. And then when Japan became expensive, they became importing five and dime stuff from China in the 80s and 90s. And the guy acquired 3 blocks of prime Brooklyn industrial housing and industrial buildings, right? He sold it because he sent his daughter to, Yale Law School and the son to Harvard Med School. No interest in five and dime business. And he sold the real estate assets for less than he could have gotten, right? Because now all the real estate has been converted into lofts, right? Anybody who knows that would happen in Brooklyn back in the day. So a lot of times it's good to keep the business. How do you guys advise people on that decision?
Let's run it around. Let's start with Carol.
Well, I think it, as Pierre Dupont just told us, it really depends on the family itself. And, I'm a big believer that everybody should have a family office. Why? Because they're just issues that when you wear the owner hat and you wear the multi-generational hat that are somewhat different than looking at the business just as if you were a banker. So really understanding who are these people, what do they want to do over the next 3, 4, 5 generations. Anybody who wants to see it, I have literally a free course online called How to Create a Family Office on my familyofficebootcamp.com on YouTube, or you can speak to me offline. But thinking about the future of your family and thinking about your kids and grandkids and what do they really want to do, it starts there. And I agree, it's much nicer to have a long-term, stable, cash-flowing operating company business. But if your kids don't want that, then it's not better. So I'll tell you, for an example, I was teaching in Singapore, and this guy looked out the window and he said, "You see that harbor out there? I scrape all the barnacles off every single boat in that harbor, if you can imagine, in Singapore." He said, "But my daughter's a graphic artist and my son is a DJ, and they do not want anything to do with the business." What are you going to do? They just don't want to. Now, you could put it in a trust and get professionals to run it, but then you still have to teach the kids how to monitor those professionals. So if you decide, well, I'm going to keep it, then at the bare minimum, your kids have to learn how to be good stewards and judges of the professionals who work for them. So there's different ways to do it. You could do that. You could keep the business, but train everybody to be a very good steward of this family wealth, or you can sell it and, as many families did, create a liquid family office and reinvest in a bunch of diversified businesses. So there's lots of different ways, but it really depends on the people.
So Carol, one of her listings here of service offerings.
Before we answer that, go to this next question. Can we dovetail into another question, which is, how do you coach family offices to pick the right partners? And I'll give you a great example. Aaron Feuerstein is discussed in Search of Excellence. He was one of the leading textile manufacturers in Massachusetts. A textile plant burned down. He took money from a private equity firm, and he was lauded because he paid all of his employees while they were rebuilding the plant, right? But he took some private equity over the years. A lot of it resulted in litigation. He never met his, milestones he was supposed to meet. And the whole family fortune, I think, kind of disappeared in litigation, right? It was a massive, fortune. So how do you advise people who to work with, who not to work with? Because
Marco's laughing again.
Oops. Well, I want to get
Gangsters
to Marco.
everywhere. Gangsters abound.
Hang on. I want to get to Marco, and I have a question for him. And then we got a couple of questions sitting here in the audience. So bear with me 1 second.
But I do have an anecdotal, a personal response to Pierre's question and all that. My father passed away, and when he passed away, it was happened to be 2 days after I got married. We owned a couple of family supermarkets and the real estate, and my mother, who's got a 15-year difference, knee jerked and got rid of it. And with hindsight, not to belabor, my so-called career, it would have been more beneficial for me if we held on to those assets over the real estate alone, to Marty's point, like Brooklyn, the real estate alone would have been a game changer for the fam. And then those businesses, would have been self-operating. So I think that a lot of times people sell businesses, like Tom said, out of fear, right? Because they want to kind of capture the money. But I do think if you don't have to be a seller and it's cash flow positive and it doesn't come with a whole lot of risks or future disintermediation, I think you should hold on to it.
Yeah,
So
stop think and plan. So I have 7 P's of proper management. Basically, proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And if you think it through, you don't need your couple of quick things. We got questions here, so we got to get a mic out. But the other one is Marco, what kind of secret sauce do you have that you're telling all your older siblings what to do?
Well, I don't tell them, listen, it's not about telling people what to do. It's guiding them and motivating them almost every day. So my siblings are specialized in different areas. None of them are good managers because they all think that what they say goes to their employees. So I have to always get involved there and play the psychological role where you're not insulting anybody, nobody's getting offended, but at the same time, everybody wants to work and produce for you. So teaching all employees, as well as my siblings, my wife, my children, how a vision works and how that vision is placed in action are 2 different things. So one, you lead by example. So I'm the one person that goes in the office at 5 in the morning and leaves probably by 1 in the morning.
No work from home for you.
No.
Tom, anything you want to input here before I go to the audience for a couple of questions that are out there?
Yeah, the decision to sell is not an easy one. I love to think that everyone's fully capable of running and leading a business all well into the future. And by far, it's the best economic answer if you perform. But the markets change, the windows change, and unfortunately, some of our owners don't see the world through the lens that we get the privilege as advisors to see. And when they make the decision to sell, it's finding someone that matches them culturally and has the ability to be successful. We've been fortunate. We don't have as many of those road-torn private equity stories that sounds like is more common up in the Northeast. But here in the Midwest, it seems to tend to work out fairly well.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to add one last comment to answer
All right, as long as they don't
Marty's
get mad
question.
at you.
It won't take long. About how do you make good decisions? Well, that's why we have something called family governance and family constitutions. I mean, that could be a whole other course on creating a set of rules so that families know how to make decisions. And ideally, you create those rules not in the middle of a crisis where somebody just passed away, or not in the middle of a very important decision: do we keep or sell a business? You create your family values, you make your voting rights, you have your constitutions, those match up with your shareholder agreements. So then when you're ready to make a big decision and you train everybody every quarter, you make all the family members, I'm sure Marco does it, have a meeting and get used to doing decisions as a group. Because in the beginning, it was just the patriarch generally who made decisions. Now, if we have sibling groups, we have to teach people how to make decisions. It's not intuitive. Just because you were born into a wealthy family with a business doesn't mean you've been taught how to make decisions, right?
Actually, the opposite may be true. a lot of times.
And there are great models for that.
We got a question out here. And by the way, Pierre, I just wanted to thank you for those inputs before.
What would you say is the most common failing that's easy to remedy for a family office, or for a family business? So this is the thing I see all the time that is like, come on, guys, at least we can start with this.
Yeah, that's the governance, having family governance, because because a lot of families, it's who yells loudest. The loudest sibling wins, the most aggressive sibling wins, dad's favorite wins, whatever. That's one way to make decisions. Usually everybody else is very resentful. And eventually, what do we have? Lawsuits bubbling up, or people splitting and leaving, or just not showing up at the meetings because they feel like no one listens to them. So putting into place governance and voting rules and starting with family values and deciding, what do we want to do? What's our bigger goal here, which is to get along, love each other, and be successful. If we all agree that's what we want, and 1,000 pages of history and lots of studies will show there's a way to do that, this is not a big mystery, then put those rules into place. At least give it a shot for a year. Get people to agree to at least try it for a year, because sometimes it takes a while to get used to it. But then you'll start to make better decisions. You really, really will. I've seen it so many times.
And I've been in the money business for quite some, as all of us have. And I say to my wife at times, I go, if you think interpersonal relationships are odd, you should see people's relationship with money. And it all boils down to entitlement. And I don't, as a famous movie once said, I don't care what you're entitled to. Right? I think that to Carol's point, you clearly have to have, clear role definition always helps. Where people stand in the stack, what they're entitled to, what they're not entitled to. I recently interviewed, because I'm looking for a thing. I recently interviewed for a wealthy family job, and it went into sort of more property management, and I'll be quick, but the big question they had to me was the big estate that's located here in August, this side of the family, this side of the family, this side of the family, they all want to be there this week. And there's 3 stepwives and 2 this and 2 that. Like, how would you manage that? And I mean, my head was nearly exploding. And I just blurted out, by seniority, like, who's been using it for the last 30 years, and they should be first in line. But there's a lot of issues that come up in terms of corporate governance that are outside of the money, outside of the stack, outside of the distributions. It also comes into use of assets and other things that people are entitled to. So the more comprehensive the document you could put together, and the more either quarterly, semi-annual, or however you want to meet, is a way to get these families, like, at least communicating on the proper front.
Thank you. Tom, anything to jump in on that before I move over to Marco, and then I'll throw some.
Yeah, real quick, I would just add, there's other stakeholders at the table. The leadership, the non-family ownership has a critical role in running and operating the business. They're often unheard. That voice is very important in both in governance and ownership succession. And that is a group of people that, as the complexity of business gets faster and harder, we should be looking to emboldening and empowering them to be successful and economically successful as well.
Thank you, Tom. Marco, anything else to jump in on that?
Just 2 things. You maintain your governance with family traditions, but you also need non-biased people involved in your business decisions. And that's what I think what Tom is referring to, because it's a very emotional state being.
Thank you. Probably the one thing that I see more often than not is that owners typically have the wrong set of advisors. They think the people they've been working with for the last 20 years are the right people to be working with to be able to manage an event as it relates to their business, related to M&A and all the other kind of things that go with it. You probably don't have the right investment advisor, the right attorney, and investment banker. People like Carol, who helped set these things up, all the people on this panel. I find that's one of the biggest failures. And they say, well, I don't want to spend the money. You'll pay for it in spades. One here.
By the way, that's a big problem in the family office space, by the way. In the family office space, getting the right people is very difficult.
Thank you, Mark.
Look at the Oscar space.
So question here, and then we got another one right here.
I wanted to make this comment earlier, but in terms of educating the next generation about how to dispose of a business, etc., I think they should all be made to read Barbarians of the Gate. And the problem with that is they'll never find this book on Google. So I think we as an industry need to maybe run a petition or change the name back to levered buyouts from private equity.
All right. If you could move the microphone up.
And
I
second
really need you on the
mortgages
microphone.
from and they changed when we were growing up, if you needed a second mortgage, it kind of meant things were going right. And they changed it to a HELOC, and everybody was like, oh, hey, I can use it. Oh yeah, naming matters.
Or onto our lightning round.
I want to make a comment, and pick up what Marco said. Controlling the resources of your company is most important. I ran an aerospace company that had a platform to launch vehicles. The first thing I did, because it required 8 resources, different technology to launch vehicles. The first thing I did was get control, or try to get control of those resources. So one of 2 things were going to happen in 5 years. I was either going to buy them out, or I was going to turn around and replace those resources. If you're a family office and you're looking to invest in a situation, look to see what technology you can get to improve that situation, or find out, because that's key. That's how you're going to generate in this world, this changing world.
Sage advice.
If you're the seller, if you want to sell the business, try to automate it as best you can, because that'll significantly increase your valuation.
We have time for 2 more
Marty, you said-
questions. We're in the lightning round.
I wanted to make sure we get final thoughts from all of our panelists. So 2 more questions, Marty says. We got 2 more questions in here. Oh, John Grismala, how could we pass you up?
One mentioned trust in estates.
Can you give the microphone?
He said no one mentioned trust in estates. Meaning what? You want us to talk about that? Well, I mean, clearly when it's a family-owned company, how you hold it. Where are you, is it in a long-term dynasty trust? I mean, there's so many different creative things you can do to hold your various operations that may or may not be interesting to just your basic corporate or private equity buyer. But yes, of course, that's important. And that goes into the whole thing. Where do we want to be in 10 or 15 years as a family? And then that should, help us to create the right estate planning and trust structuring to hold all our various assets. By the way, then we could have another hour on reporting on all of that. So we have all the right information to make good decisions. There's great systems out there today that weren't around even 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, families have a lot more structuring they can do from people like Marco who are outside of the US, who are not taxed on worldwide income. There's even more to be done, which is, you can play with jurisdictions and locations more than Americans can, for example.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. So we have time for one more question, Marty said, from the audience. And I'd like each of our panelists to be prepared to have a final thought that we could be able to share. So is there one person that has one more question? Come on, none of you were shy.
I have a question for Tom Zucker if nobody has a question.
There you go.
Hey, Tom, where's your deal flow come from? And how'd you get so good at it? Tom Zucker.
The classic lawyers, bankers, and accountants and friends and past clients is where the deal flow comes from. We're fortunate enough that we take 30 deals to market a year all across the country in the industrial, business service, and healthcare space.
How many deals do you see a year?
We see over 400 deals. We pitch on 70.
Appreciate those metrics. A lot of people, probably not in this room, but a lot of people don't understand the math and the way that funnel gets awfully skinny at the bottom. All right, so that's the last of our questions here in the room. All right, and let's see, who are we going to go with first? Ladies first. Parting thought.
Parting thought. Hard to get me to make a parting thought. I would say family business, whether it's dealing in the private equity or M&A world, is a different animal than just your basic corporation that's owned by shareholders. We've talked about that. And, the important thing is to keep the family at the center of it and to figure out what the family wants over the next few generations before you make these decisions. In particular, what do your kids want? Do they want to be part of this or not? And if the answer is yes, prepare them as young as possible. 10 years or more. When I was at Rockefeller, we started when they were 6 years old, when I was at the Rockefeller family office preparing the kids, literally. And if you're going to keep it, but they're not going to run it, then putting into place a lot of training to make your inheritors great stewards of the money and able to judge their professionals, have governance so that people can have a fair way to make decisions. And that will reduce the likelihood of a lot of nasty lawsuits in the family. And that's why you see after, 3 or 4 generations, only 10% left with their money. If you want to be in that 10 or 20%, you have to do certain things. And I will be more than happy to talk your ear off about what those things are.
Thank you, Carol. Let's go to Marco.
Well, I go back to traditions, right? I embrace the traditions, not of my dad's, but before him and before that. We're the 4th generation, and I prefer those traditions. So that's what I apply. And lead with vision, lead with actions, and disrupt. Anything that is status quo today lacks tradition and values, and I disrupt that. I always think that way, and that's how we have been successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco. Chris, what can you tell us?
Well, one thing I would like to say is, having spoken on a number of M&A panels and private equity panels, this has to be one of the best because we actually brought it into the family office network conversation as opposed to the macro conversation of where the global is in terms of interest rates and all that kind of thing. And I think that this has been an incredibly practical knowledge because this is the family office network and both PE and M&A are relevant to these conversations. So I'd like just to wrap up and say that.
Thank you very much. Tom Zucker, you're on the 18th hole going for the putt. What do you got?
Likely to miss it, but I'll certainly give you my parting comments. I am a big believer that families have very difficult decisions to make, and we as advisors on a constant basis are providing input. The biggest thing we have to do is listen to what they're saying and the realities of the family and the leadership team. Sometimes there is a time to sell, and sometimes there's a time to hold. And our job sometimes is to convince people not to be fearful when there's really should be greedy. And so continue to put the client first and put those thoughts in mind as you advise your clients going forward.
Thank you very much, Tom. Can we say thank you to our panelists?